Right, welcome to another episode of Under the Influence with me, Jazz Wright, and Dilesh Popat from Turning Point, and we're blessed to have Sarah Hancock-Smith, and I'll let Sarah tell us what she does here in Leicester.
Yeah, so I'm Sarah. I'm the Senior Operations Manager for Turning Point. So that means that it's my responsibility to run the services across Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland for drug and alcohol use.
Again, I've been working with Sarah for several years now, and it's again always a pleasure to work with you. I know you talk about Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, but there's a huge dynamics to this. It's not just Leicester and Rutland. There's also a lot more. There's prison services, there's a hospital liaison team, there's hubs dotted around.
Yeah, you're right, Dilesh. I think that sometimes we forget how much we actually deliver within our services. So in the community, we have about 2,500 people in treatment with us, but we also run the drug and alcohol treatment services in HMP Leicester, so in the prison, and we also have a team of staff who are based in the hospital. So they basically see anyone who's come into hospital with a drug or alcohol related admission and make sure that those people kind of get help. We actually also have now got a team in the hospital that are seeing people who have gone into hospital following a knife-related crime. So we actually are helping support kind of victims of violence as well. So it is really very diverse what we do, and we also work with children as well as adults. So we have under 18s in treatment with us as well as adults.
I just wanted to, I think it's the latest one that I've been hearing about as well, the homeless team as well, isn't it, Sarah?
Yeah, so one of the new initiatives we've set up, I guess within about the last year, is, we've always worked with homeless people across Leicester, particularly Leicester City, and we felt that we could deliver more by having a specialist sub-team to work with homeless service users. So we've now got 4 members of staff who all are, it's their role entirely to work with any service users that are homeless. So that might be people that are street homeless, but also people who are living in hostels or kind of unstable accommodation. And really the approach there is about us being really flexible and responsive to understand the barriers that people who don't have stable accommodation might have to accessing treatment, and then be really flexible and responsive to help them engage in the best way they can.
So that sounds really demanding. Not just your role, but the whole team working under you. So it must get quite pressurised at times, surely.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't high pressure at times. For our staff working within the services, it's a demanding role helping people. But what I would say is it's also really, really rewarding. Helping people to turn their lives around and see change. There's nothing more rewarding than that. And I always say that, the favourite part of my role is working with our peer mentors. So that's people who have been through treatment, are in recovery, and then are helping other people. And just to see some of those individuals who, maybe a year, ago were really struggling with their own substance use, and now they've turned their lives around and are helping others. That's what motivates me every day to come to work. So.
Well, that must be a huge motivation for those individuals as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that peer mentoring is got like numerous benefits. It helps us as a service. It's a kind of, I always say it's a bit of a bridge between us as a service and our service users, because you've got people with lived experience who are able to kind of reach out to service users and increase engagement. But it helps our service users, because they will often say, well, if he or she did it, I can do it.
Yeah.
It's like that belief that actually I can change. But also for the peer mentors themselves, I hear a lot of them say that actually it helps their own recovery, to be helping others, to be kind of giving back, and to be feeling that actually they are helping other people to achieve recovery. So it's kind of, peer mentoring it's something we set up about 10 years ago, but I can't imagine treatment services before we did that, really. You know, it's kind of crazy to think that before peer mentoring and service user involvement, we didn't really have that, and now it's just a fundamental part of what we do.
You know, looking at Leicester, it's a very diverse community, and you spoke about engagement. How important is it with the engagement from the minorities, especially from the BME community, to work with you and just for you to engage with them as well? I mean, I know the Sikh Recovery Network, we've been working closely with Turning Point now for the best part of 2 years, and we've referred people that have come to the Sikh Recovery Network who need specialist treatment, more expertise, and that really helps us. So how important is that engagement working with community groups as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's massively important to us. You know, Leicester's an incredibly diverse community, and you know, at the moment, those in treatment are not representative of the diversity of Leicester. So we know that we need to do more to reach out to diverse communities to overcome any barriers to engagement in services. And I think that's why, I guess it was probably a couple of years ago that we set up Dilesh's role, which is all about community engagement, really. And what we wanted to do through that role was not to try and do it all ourselves, but for Dilesh to link in with community groups who are actually the key to engaging with communities, you know, so things like the Sikh Recovery Network, Spinney Hill Recovery, who we're working with, you know, the community groups have the engagement with the diverse community. So by us working together in partnership, we can bring that specialist kind of substance misuse expertise to work together to engage people and overcome some of those barriers. So, you know, I think that I'm really proud of the work that Dilesh has been doing, and I feel like we've made huge progress. I think we've still got a long way to go. I think that there's other community groups that we need to be engaging with more, but it feels like, you know, by working in partnership with people like yourselves, Jazz, that actually we've been able to reach a wider group of service users than we have done for a long time. So
I think that's where, when we talk about the topic of being out there in communities, we do need to do more as a whole, not just as a service, but as communities themselves. I personally think a lot of communities themselves don't want to be involved in organisations or look at it as a negative. I've knocked on doors before. I think there was one area in Leicester where I went in to say, this is my role, this is what I'd like to do, I'd like to do some work together. And they basically said, oh, we have a lot of people drinking at the back and they leave cans and stuff on the floor, can you pick them up for us? And I think that's another part of it as well, that we have to have communities that want to engage in support we're offering as well.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
I think don't you find though, Sarah and you, Dilesh, should do that, you know, the recovery group, you know, people like Turning Point, the work you do and the partnership, it's not a sexy sort of place to work in, is it? And like for you, instance, knocking on someone's door saying, do you need help? Oh, well, yeah, you can clean the mess up at the back.
Yeah.
But, you know, and I know within in the Sikh community a lot now, they're delivering the free food, we call it the langar. They seem to be delivering that to the homeless people. So that's kind of more accepted in our community. But to go out and work with the alcoholics and the drug addict isn't as acceptable, if you like, or isn't as I don't know the right word to use. But I don't know. In the recovery community, to go out there and to reach out to alcoholics and drug addicts, is it going to be perceived to be so great? Whereas you're delivering free food to homeless people or packages to the homeless.
Yeah, it's kind of seen as more kind of acceptable to do that. I mean, I guess that there's also there can be a lot of stigma around accessing treatment services, and sometimes that can be a barrier in some communities, can't it? That actually there's stigma, there's shame involved in saying, that actually I've got an alcohol problem or I've got a drug problem, and some people don't want their communities to know about that, and I think that's why we want to work together with community groups, because I think it's important that we do that together with community groups, but that also people, if they want to access support and they don't want anything to do with their community knowing, that actually they can do that confidentially.
And that's very interesting. And we find, despite but knowing that there is a need in our community, but some people don't want to come to the temple for these meetings. They don't want to go to the mosques for these meetings, and they don't want to go to the Hindu temple for these meetings, do they? And so, if anyone does want to access, they've got issues with alcohol or drugs, how do they access some of the services that you operate here in Leicester?
So right now, because of the COVID pandemic, our services are being delivered in a very different way. So most of our services are telephone based at the moment, with some online groups also running. But it's really simple. If anyone sort of identifies that they have an issue, they can go on to the Turning Point website. They can make a self-referral for themselves. They just need to Google Turning Point Leicestershire, or they can telephone us. We'll take a referral over the phone, and we can work with that individual in whatever way they're comfortable with. So, if confidentiality is a real concern to people, actually the way that we're delivering our services at the moment is highly confidential. It's a telephone based. People don't even have to leave their own homes to receive their treatment. So actually I hope that perhaps some of the ways that we're doing treatment now might meet the needs of some more diverse communities more. But I think it's always about choice, and not making any assumptions about what people do or don't want. For some people, actually engaging in a group that's kind of linked to their religion would be really good for them, whereas for some people they would feel really ashamed and not want their community leaders to know, and therefore they would want to access treatment completely away from that. And I think that's why it's important for us to have an understanding of that, so that we've got both options available to people.
And I also think that one thing that we do need to touch upon is, because I get this all the time, and I'm out about, do you speak Punjabi? Do you speak Gujarati? Do you speak Swahili? Do you speak thousands of different languages? Unfortunately, again, I said earlier, I speak 2 languages, not very well. But I know with Turning Point, we do offer the service to all languages, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, I mean, so we're fortunate to have a diverse staff group who have a lot of language skills within our staffing group. So sometimes our recovery workers will be able to deliver treatment in different languages, but we also will use interpreting services. We tend to use a telephone interpreting service, which works well for people, so that we can actually engage with people in any language. We would never be able to meet all of the language needs across the whole county, but that's never a barrier to us for delivering treatment.
So if I was to speak Gujarati and I wanted some support, would I have to book a different time slot or book in advance? Would it be any different to me as it would to somebody else?
No, I mean, what you'd need to do would be just to flag up on the referral that that you prefer to have treatment in Gujarati, and then we would make sure that we made arrangements for that assessment to either have an interpreter or to have a member of staff who could speak Gujarati. So we never want it to be a barrier to people's treatment.
And again, I can sort of even vouch. I've been there before where I've had to take assessments and see clients in speaking different language. It's actually another part of the service that we tend to forget quite easily, that we have a service that we can do in so many different languages and offer it to so many different people.
And I think we're really lucky to have such a diverse staff team, actually. I think that our staff team is really kind of representative of the communities of Leicester, I think, and whilst we never make assumptions that our staff are going to use their language skills, and it's obviously something that we've always got interpreting for, actually, many of our staff are really happy to use their language skills to help us to engage.
So you spoke about the pandemic, COVID. How's that impacted on your services? Have you noticed an increase in people accessing?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting kind of looking at the trends across the pandemic. So in the early stages of lockdown, what we saw a rise in drug users accessing the services, so particularly opiate users. I think that there was a concern that there was going to be an interruption to drug supply. And there was a lot of homeless people who were getting temporary accommodation. So we saw a rise in opiate users and a big drop in alcohol users coming forward because of lockdown. What we've seen is that as lockdown lockdown's been lifted, the referrals for alcohol treatment have rocketed, as would be expected. And I was speaking yesterday on the radio and on East Midlands Today about the rise in numbers of people accessing alcohol services, and that's for a number of reasons. One is more people coming forward for help, so being referred because actually perhaps they've been struggling with their alcohol use during the pandemic, whether that's because they've lost their job or it's been an isolating and stressful time. But also what we've seen is that some of the people who have been engaged in treatment with us have found it more difficult to make changes during this period of time because life is not normal. So for those two reasons, we're now working with about 10% more alcohol users than we were at the beginning of the pandemic, which is that's a really good thing from my perspective because we're reaching more people. But I think that we're only scratching the surface when we're talking about alcohol use. There's so many more individuals who are using alcohol problematically who don't come forward to treatment, and that's who we really want to try to engage with, and that's why it's so important that we do things like our outreach work to diverse communities.
It's one thing that I noticed as well, even driving around in the community. I live not too far from Belgrave, and during the pandemic I was driving home and driving through Belgrave and just thinking, street drinking, more people drinking, more people at shops. I noticed that in the BME community as well, that was a big increase. Again, I'm not sure if you've noticed if we've had any more referrals over the last...
Yeah, I think that would be something that would be very interesting to look at actually from our data. At the moment, I've just kind of looked at it at a service level, but it would be interesting to look at, are there any trends around ethnicity, gender, age, in terms of the increasing numbers coming forward. But I know that was flagged up to us, wasn't it, around actually increasing street drinking around the Belgrave area, and therefore we've been looking at doing some outreach work to try to engage with people. But I think that's kind of an example of people's routines having been disrupted and changed, and for some people, kind of early lockdown, it almost felt like a bit of a holiday. It's like actually things were really different, and some people therefore started drinking more, but then for some people that becomes a daily habit, and then actually they might have lost their jobs or they might have been furloughed, and then every day at 6 o'clock they're opening a bottle of wine, or 5 o'clock they're cracking open a few beers, and then it becomes something that happens over and over again.
And I think when lockdown happened early on in March, the weather was really good as well.
Beautiful,
wasn't it?
Yeah.
So people were drinking more anyway.
We've been fortunate with the weather throughout lockdown, haven't we? From a kind of like well-being perspective, but with that comes people drinking outside.
I noticed early on in the lockdown, barbecues seem to be happening a lot earlier than what they usually would. So the people, like you say, you touch, habits. Yeah. So those habits just kind of crept. Yeah. People were off work for a lot longer. Yeah. And the drinking patterns changed.
Yeah, it's drinking patterns changing as well, isn't it? Because I guess that a lot of people will drink when they socialise with others in groups, and I know things like weddings and parties and things like that will be a kind of key place where people might drink heavily, and obviously a lot of those events have not happened or have been much smaller, but I think that what that's led to is people drinking more in their homes when they've been isolated, and that's, I think, when it can become something that becomes really problematic for people, because it then becomes the norm that actually they're drinking every day and that's just normal for them, rather than it just being about, well, I drink when I'm out socialising.
And that's where, like, for working for Turning Point and working alongside, it's been where I'm just like, this is perfect for me to go out there and work with these people. I want to be out there on the streets, and the pandemic has obviously not allowed us to run full speed ahead, but it's always good to have the support from yourself, where we send a few emails and we're like, yep, we get planning. Yeah. Let's see what we can do. Let's go walk in the streets and let's go do some outreach. Yeah. And that's the joys of working for an organisation that notices that there is need for more.
Yeah.
There's not many places that always say we want more clients, we want
Yeah,
less.
yeah.
Most people want less. But
I know, and it's kind of a vicious circle, really. I mean, like, you know, obviously I'm concerned about our staff and their workloads, but I want to reach as many people as possible with our services. And so, you know, I'm constantly thinking about ways to improve our services to make them as efficient as possible so that we can reach a wider pool of people. And I think that actually the pandemic has given us some opportunities to change some of the ways that we work. So we're doing some more things via telephone and stuff, which actually then enables us to reach a wider pool of people. But, you know, it's great to have a staff team that really want to engage with people and want to do that. And that's what we're always, you know, wanting to enable that as much as possible, but whilst obviously protecting our staff safety at the same time. So,
Sarah, you know, eventually things are going to get back to normal. You know, we don't
please, soon.
Yeah. I mean, how do you envisage things to be then? Obviously, I mean, you talk about drinking patterns change, people's use of drugs, you know. How do you feel that you're going to be able to cope? Because I can imagine the demand's going to be people accessing these services. And you want to, and I agree with you.
Yeah.
We want people to come forward and seek help.
Yeah. I think that that I do envisage a rise in numbers accessing our services, particularly for alcohol, over the coming kind of 6 to 12 months. That's a good thing from my perspective, but we are going to have to think about doing things differently. I mean, I think that there's been some really good things in terms of the way that we've worked during this pandemic, and I think a blended approach to treatment where some of our interventions are face-to-face and some of our interventions are via telephone or online will be the way for the future, because actually what we found is that a lot of people have preferred telephone-based interventions because it's been more convenient to them. You know, they've been able to access it from their home, and actually our staff have said that they've had some better quality interventions with people, because often when people are coming to our services, they're always in a rush to be somewhere else. So when they're on the phone, actually they're where they want to be, they're at home. And what we've also found that our engagement rates in treatment have been better, so less people have been dropping out of treatment because they're answering the phone but they might not have turned up for their appointment. And we're also seeing more people who get referred actually starting treatment because they haven't got that kind of fear of walking through the door on the first day, which we know puts people off because actually it's all telephone based. So actually we'll bring a lot of that to the future ways that we work, and we'll just continue to, you know, work collaboratively with the community, you know, with peer mentors, to make sure that we can reach as many people as possible.
But Sarah, you know, something you've just talked. There's a lot of positives there, and I think one of the things that I like to focus on is the positives.
Yeah.
And I know even in lockdown, we've had some great stories where people they've never been around their family so much, so that's helped them.
Yeah.
They've done things with the kids that they never would have done.
Yeah.
Who normally just go out to work, come in, and straight on drinking.
Yeah.
But you talked about the blended approach of interventions. I mean, so there is a lot of positives, isn't there? And the way you work in the future is going to change and is going to benefit people.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that you know, what's been interesting about the period of lockdown is that, yeah, for some people it's been very difficult and some people have been drinking more and things. But there's also been people who have really taken the opportunity to turn their lives around. And there's been some service users who have had really challenging lives beforehand, who have actually, you know, perhaps they were homeless. You know, we've had women who have been involved in sex work previously, where actually they have taken the opportunity of the pandemic, they've been given an opportunity to get temporary accommodation, and actually they've used it to turn their lives around, and there's lots of examples of that as well. So, you know, it's not all a kind of doom and gloom, you know, everything's been a terrible situation with the pandemic. And I think that the way we always try and approach things is trying to look for the positives and the solutions, because, you know, that's how we're going to be able to best help people. So
And I think that's, again, from working face-to-face with clients. At the start of the pandemic, it was like a lot of service users are coming in, well, I've not got the stress from work.
yeah,
I've not got the stress from this crazy life that I've been living, and now I'm being able to spend it with my kids, my wife, my family, and I've been able to make them changes. And I think at the start I was closing service users a lot easier than I thought.
Yeah, like successfully completing.
Because service users are coming in and saying, well, I'm not got the stress of day-to-day life, and that's helped a lot as well for during this pandemic. And the good part about it, I've spoke to them as well, since a lot of people have been going back to work, and I'm still getting positive feedback. This part of the pandemic has helped them, and they've gone back to work and they're taking less stress on. They're being able to live their life a lot better.
Yeah.
I found that as well. I mean, I know everyone wants to hear some doom and gloom stories, but there is so many positives that have come out of this pandemic. I genuinely believe in some of the stories that we're hearing. You know, people spending time at home doing things that I mean, for me, for instance, I've never picked a paintbrush up in 30 years. So I did some painting.
Yeah.
So there's things that, you know, people would never have done that, and it's helped them, whether it's, you know, with their alcohol addiction or drug addiction.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of good come out of this. But Sarah, you know, you touched upon working with communities as well. How important is that as well moving forward with you and not just your role, but with the people that you're working with as well as people like Turning Point?
I think that we need to do more of it, because actually, if we want to extend our reach, then working with community-based organisations is a really good way to do that. And I think that all services nowadays are operating on reduced funding, and only by us all working together can we actually make a difference for our service users and our potential service users. So, you know, I see it as more important than ever. You know, I think that as I said, I think we've done a lot of really great work with Dilesh's role, although Dilesh is only one person, and there's probably a need for a number of roles like that. You know, but actually what Dilesh is kind of showing us is that by working in collaboration and together with community groups, we can achieve more. So I think it's definitely something I want to expand in the future.
I think the work that we've done together, it just proves. I mean, Dilesh saw our poster, the recovery group we had at the temple on East Park Road.
Yeah.
But he picked up the phone, and you know, and that's all because you took the initiative. You picked up the phone, and it brought us together.
And exactly, because what Dilesh could have done in his role is just gone off solo and tried to do it on his own. You know, which is I think the mistake that maybe treatment services have made in the past of going, you know, we're going to do more work with BME communities. We're going to go and do our own outreach. Whereas actually, that's not the way to do it. It's to do it
and
together.
That's a good point. That's happened in Birmingham with the project. It worked for 3 years. They had funding for 3 years. They tried to do it alone, and it failed because it didn't work. And I think some of the work you're doing, you touched upon the Spinney Hill project, the work you're doing with us, we can sustain this because we're working together on it, and we can use your expertise, we can use your expertise, Sarah, and we can provide ours. Living in that community, rather than working against each other.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think I spoke about it again last week. Is that when I first seen your thing on your group on Facebook, and you laugh, and I can see you sitting here laughing at me, because the first thing I was saying, how are they doing that? Who the heck? Why are they doing this? And I was just, at first, I was just like...
So angry
about this, because we were unaware, and we're the drug treatment service in Leicester, but rather than taking that anger and being frustrated and just watching it from afar, it was like, let me approach this person, let me see what he's doing, if I can help, if we can help each other, if we can work together. And 2 years later, we're here.
And it's great, you know, that you've allowed us to kind of work together with you, because, you know, I guess that some communities or some individuals might say, well, actually, no, we don't need you as the kind of treatment service. And I think it's really, you know, we're really thankful that you've allowed us to work together with you.
Like I say, it's a partnership. Even the Gurdwara on East Park Road, they've been fantastic. You know, they couldn't do enough for us. We did an awareness weekend there, and help start the meetings. And so I think the engagement with these people in the community, the senior members of the community, is important, and they're engaging. And wherever we've been, Birmingham South, or where there's a big Sikh community, they have engaged, and I think that's important, having the Sikh leaders or the community leaders on board as well.
Yeah, definitely, because then it's kind of actually, it is acceptable, you know, it's okay to ask for help.
And we all know it's a problem in our community, not just in the Punjabi Sikh community, but you know, it's a problem in every community. But for those community leaders to accept that and say, yes, we're willing to work together. That's what's going to really make a difference, isn't it?
That's that knock-on effect, because I could have gone into the Gurdwara and knocked on the door, and they probably would have said to me, there's some cans at the back you need to pick up.
Whereas actually doing it together.
With the relationship you already have, And knowing that community, you can walk in there and say, well, let's do this together. And that's what it's allowed us to do. It's allowed us to do this together rather than just me trying to walk in there on my own or you on your own. So not only that doing this together has allowed a better service for the people that you see, because you've referred several people to me. And without that, I wouldn't have been able to be in a position where Sarah's praising me for the work I've done. That's been the work you've also done as well.
I think I'm over and above me or you. I think it's fantastic because it's allowed people the opportunity to get into recovery.
To get in and to make changes,
and for them to maybe pass on that as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's what, when I put my head on that pillow at night, that's the most rewarding thing for me.
Yeah.
For me, it's for the opportunity, because it reminds me where I was 11 years ago.
Yeah.
In that dark place. So for me, that's the biggest gift of recovery for me.
And I think that the more people that we can get engaged into treatment from the Sikh community, the more we will get engaged into treatment, isn't it? And when we'll probably be looking at another worker to, because actually that's what I'd love to see. I'd love it. I think it'd be brilliant.
From today is that we've had Manny, who's been here today with us, and he's been through his treatment, and we're looking at getting him on the peer mentor course. So it's that knock-on effect. We talk so highly of peer mentors, but now it's having these peer mentors being able to support the community and being able to offer something different as well.
And having that expertise in the community as well as the expertise in substance misuse, which I think that's where it kind of goes hand in hand, isn't it? And I think it's really exciting, the opportunities for us to really make a difference for people out in the communities.
Sarah, this week is Alcohol Awareness Week. How important is that for your services in Leicester to focus on Alcohol Awareness Week? Because we all know, in every community it's a problem, but to raise awareness through these channels as well, it's important.
I think that weeks like Alcohol Awareness Week just really give us an opportunity to just remind people of the services that are there to support people, to get people perhaps having to think about their alcohol use, thinking about whether actually it's gone up a bit recently, whether it's starting to have a negative impact on any aspect of their life, whether it's their health, their work, their relationships, and to remind people that actually it's okay to ask for help, and that services are there for people, they're friendly and non-judgmental, and it's very easy to get into those services. They're free services, there's no waiting list for these services, and it's as simple as going online and making a referral or making a quick telephone call, and that can be the catalyst for people to make changes. And what I always think is really good as well about weeks like Alcohol Awareness Week is it helps us to reach people earlier. We're there for people when they hit rock bottom, and perhaps some people have lost their jobs or lost their homes, but actually I really want to reach those people who have just started to drink a bit too much, and they're perhaps started to drink a bottle of wine a night, or they're drinking a few beers every day, and actually they're starting to find it difficult not to do that. That's where I really want to kind of reach out, because if we can make changes for people at that stage, we can help prevent it from getting to the point where it negatively impacts upon their life and their health. So we work with anyone regardless of their level of substance use. It doesn't have to get really, really bad for people to come forward.
But I think, especially because of this pandemic now, probably more poignant, and more people might reach out and be aware that Alcohol Awareness Week, because of their, as we touched upon earlier, habits have changed and their drinking consumption has gone up.
Yeah, and it's a good opportunity to just get people to reflect. Maybe people will do like a little alcohol quiz online or something like that during Alcohol Awareness Week, or they'll pick up a leaflet, or they'll listen to this podcast and start to think, well, actually maybe that sounds a little bit like me, and actually it sounds like it would be okay to get treatment, in the same way that if someone had a physical health problem, they'd go to their doctors and get some treatment. Actually, an alcohol issue is no different. Actually people need to come forward and ask for help, and the help is there for them.
Dilesh, Sarah just touched on, for me when you was just talking then, some of the things that people can find through these services. It's free, confidential, and non-judgmental. And that's those are three things that people do find that kind of bothers them sometimes, or what they worry about?
Yeah, often people say, how much does your service cost? And it's like, it's free.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't cost anything.
And this is where I notice as well, because I've spoken to several people, family members from the BME community as well, that have spent thousands and thousands sending their family members to rehab or detox in India or in Punjab, somewhere all around the world, without realising there's this free service at their doorstep.
Yeah.
And as well as everything else Sarah's mentioned to Turning Point offer, there is also the opportunity of doing the rehab and detox through these services as well, without having to spend thousands and thousands to send them across the world.
Yeah.
And that for me is a really frustrating part of what we do, is families just aren't aware that Turning Point's here in Leicester, and because they don't even, some of them don't even go to their GP.
Yeah.
The first thing that comes to the mind, let's send them to India and get them into a rehab, spend thousands, and the first thing some of those guys do, or women do, when they get back here is go back on the drink.
Have a drink, because actually it's about what's the long-term support going to be. You know, it's not just a case of do a detox and stop drinking, it's actually what's going to help somebody to not drink longer term. And if the problems and the issues that were leading to the drinking aren't fixed, then actually just taking the drink away doesn't solve the problem, does it? Yeah.
And it's even in this, in some of the rehabs here, we find some of them don't even make it home. And
definitely. Yeah.
And what you get from people like the services you provide is the aftercare.
Yeah.
And that is important for people, the aftercare.
I mean, when you spoke about sort of friends and family, then it kind of just reminded me that it's a service that we offer that a lot of people don't realise, is that actually we have a worker whose role is entirely to work with the families of our service users. And actually it's perhaps something for me and Dilesh to talk more about, is actually how do we reach out to communities around that role as well, because we have around about 100 family members who are engaging in support in their own right, because actually it is very difficult to be the family member of someone with a drug or alcohol problem, and actually supporting family members to realise that actually locking someone in a room and not letting them drink is not very safe, or sending them to a private rehab is not necessary. That's the kind of thing that we can support family members with. So I think that's perhaps something for me and Dilesh to talk about, is actually how we make that kind of work in terms of community engagement, because I would expect that our current family members that are engaging in treatment are not reflective of diverse communities, and that's something for us to think about.
You can also bring Jazz into this meeting as well, because I know a lot of the work you do as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Family members as well.
Yeah, definitely. That would be really great for us to talk further about that. Yeah.
Well, Sarah, thank you for your time. And,
thank you.
And just one final question to you. You've been working remotely, I guess. So what have you been under the influence of lately?
Well, I've been under the influence of tea and chocolate.
Right, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.